Hey, everyone. I do hope and trust that you are well today. I pray that the week so far is treating you well. And my hope and prayer is that you are well and safe wherever you are, and God is keeping you whole. I hope you've been able to catch us as we've gone through the introduction of the book of Esther and the first and the second chapter of the book of Esther. And today we jump straight into the third chapter of the book of Esther. And so far, before we dive into this chapter, we've encountered four characters. The first one being King Xerxes, who was the king of the Persian kingdom. As we said earlier, this was one of the biggest, not actually one, was the biggest kingdom at that point in time. We've come across Queen Vashti, who was his first wife, who was queen, and then she was banished. We've come across Esther, who became the queen after Vashti was banished, and we also came across Mordecai, who was a cousin to Esther, who he had actually played a role in raising her, because we are told Esther did not have a father, neither did he have a mother. And so today, in the third chapter, we're going to come across the third character. And today's fifth character rather, from the third chapter is Haman. And so allow me just to read the first two verses of the third chapter, and then I'm going to explain from that. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. So basically, we come across this guy Haman, and for some reason he's been given a seat of honor higher than all other officials. Basically, from that, I think I understand that he could have been second in command over all Persia. So this guy was powerful. You remember in the first chapter, we looked at power. So the same power, or something close to the king, now Haman had. And to some extent, because of that power, guys were expected to kneel down and pay honor to Haman. But one Mordecai did not do that. And then you're told in chapter 3 that, verse 3, the royal officials of the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Verse 4 says, "Day after day, they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore, they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew." So here, guys are, whenever they see Haman, they're bowing down, they're kneeling. It's like they're worshipping him, quote unquote. But this guy Mordecai, he is refusing to do that. He's like, "No, me, I can't do that." And then he had told them he was a Jew. And if you know anything about Jews, even back to the commandments Moses gave them, they were told to have no other god apart from Yahweh. And basically, bowing down somebody basically meant it was as if you are giving honor that was reserved to God to this man. And so Mordecai resisted and did not choose to do that. And then you're told that as that went on, Haman was told, and Haman became angry. He became angry at it. And in verse 5 to 6, you're told Haman was so angry that at some point he wanted to destroy and kill Mordecai, but he realized since Mordecai was a Jew, it was easy just to destroy the whole of the Jewish community, because it was a Jewish thing for you not to bow down to any other person. And that's what we see in verse 5 and 6. And then in verse 7, you're told, in the 12th year of King Xerxes. So time is moving on, guys. The last time we saw, we were at the 10th. We were at the 10th. 7th year during the time of Esther. So 4 years had passed, and now it's another 5 years that has passed since the incident happened when she became queen. And so these 5 years have passed. A lot has happened, and here we have Haman. And we are told that he went and cast lot, so that he will choose a day of the month where he will get to now propose for the destruction or the annihilation of the children of Israel. Basically, casting lot is, to us, it's close to flipping the coin toss, which happens during games. So it's basically a random thing done for random selection to help choose something. And so Haman does that, and he gets a date, the month, which is the 12th month, the month of Adar. And then he goes on now, he creates a proposal, goes to the kings and tells the kings that King Xerxes, there are certain people dispersed and scattered among the people of the provinces and your kingdom whose customs are different from all other people and who do not obey the king's laws, if it is not for the king's best interest to tolerate them. And then in verse 9, he goes and now proposes that the idea to give some money so that these people would be destroyed. And he's giving a lot of money. If you think about it, this guy is giving 10,000 talents. That's basically around 345 tons of talents. That's a lot, guys. And this guy is willing to part with that amount of whatever property he had, whatever amount of money he had. Again, talents were a monetary value that was used at that time. And so this guy is willing to let go of that amount so that he will kill people. This goes to show you how people, even in our world, some people are willing to give a lot for the sake of destruction of innocent people, or for the sake of the loss of lives, or the loss of property of innocent people. I do not need to explain that. We have seen that in our country even this year, where people are willing to part with a lot of money. I won't even say names or even be clear about it, because we all know. And they're willing to make the sacrifice so that others may suffer. And here we have one other like that, and that is Haman. And so what happens after that is the king is more than willing. He's like, and I think King Xerxes was, sorry to say, was a reckless king, because in verse 10, to 11, he gave Haman his signet ring. Signet rings were those big rings with symbols at the top. And basically this was a sign of authority. It's like the president's signature. When he appends a signature on a bill, no one else has the authority to do that. It's the king only. But if the king delegated that to anyone else to do it, basically meant he was sharing his power. And so again, we see a lot of power play here. Mordecai has the power to decree a law. And so he goes ahead, does it, goes and now sends out a letter. And from verse 12 to verse 14, we are told that now the decree became a law, and it was sent to all provinces. And at this point in time, it is the beginning of another year. But you're told in the first month of that year, the letters were sent out so that the execution will happen at the end of that year. Basically, there was a whole 12 months or so the guys will now prepare themselves for execution. And this was sent to all the 127 provinces of the Persian kingdom. And so the Jews were going to be destroyed, and it was a matter of time. So it was a matter of counting down. And then the worst thing after this, or the interesting thing after this, is both King Xerxes and Haman sit down to drink. And while they are doing this, there are people who are worried. There is turmoil within the kingdom, because now the Jews know that there is a bounty on their head. People are going to kill them. People want to destroy them. And so they are worried. But I love this story because it's not the end to the story. We all know for sure that if you read back to the book of Genesis, one of the promises that God made to Abraham was that his nation will be a great nation, or that he would have as many descendants as the stars in the sky. And this is still in play at this point in Esther's story. And so we know that the Jews were scattered there, that the Jews, basically a majority, or even all of them, were in the kingdom of Persia. And therefore, whatever Haman had passed, basically meant that a whole nation will be destroyed. And if, quote unquote, if it were for the plans of man to prosper, as we usually think, the Israelites would have been destroyed. And basically that would have meant no Jesus, no Paul, all those things. But just to come back to that story, I'm reminded of a verse in Proverbs 19 verse 21. And this is what it says. It says, many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purposes that prevail. I'll repeat it again. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purposes that prevails. Whatever is planned by man can never override God's plan. And I think at this point in time, if you are to read this story, if you are reading this story in without having known how the story unveils, without knowing how the story ends, you will basically know that Haman is a powerful man, and whatever he wants, he will get. But at this point, I know for sure, even if it seems as if the Israelites are going to die, even if it seems Haman is going to lose, I am reminded of that scripture that says, many are the plans in a man's heart, but the purposes of the Lord prevail. God is still the same God who protects his people. And for you and me, this basically means, guys, as we go through life, we have an opportunity to trust in the power, in the working of God, in the midst of a world where a lot is unknown. In a midst where a lot is planned on our behalves, and sometimes we never know about it. But the same God who was with these children of Israel at this point in the beginning of that year is the same God who's still with us. And so I pray that we learn to see him as the one who ultimately brings his purposes to pass, and that he's a God who preserves. Again, it's very interesting that we are talking about this, and one of the things we mentioned earlier in the video is that the name Hadassah, which is Esther's Hebrew name, actually means a myrtle, which represents God's preservation. And again, I remember saying that one of the most interesting things about the Old Testament is that every name that is given to somebody, all these names that are given to these prophets, to these books, actually are tied with something God is doing in that book. And so, as we continue to unravel, I know that we're going to see what happens in the next chapter. I'm going to leave you in suspense, but for sure, God is a God who preserves. And that is my prayer for us as we go through life. May we see God as a God who preserves. May we see God as a God whose purposes are never thwarted, but his purposes always prevail. Be blessed. See you tomorrow.